My father, Liang, personally tore my S-rank class, the Shadow King, right out of my body to give it to my illegitimate half-brother, Li Jia. I watched as Liang patted the orb of light into Li Jia's chest, feeling a violent spasm rip through me. It felt as if my internal organs had been hollowed out completely. He didn't look at me once, simply pointing his finger toward the door. Li Jia has more talent than you. This class won't be a waste in his hands. After saying that, he tossed a card down. The bank card landed at my feet as he barked, "Take these 100,000 yuan and get out." I didn't pick the card up from the floor. Instead, I forced myself to stand up, my body trembling. I stared at the back of this so-called father of mine. I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth and thought, I'm keeping score of this debt. Then, I turned around. I walked out the front door of the house. As I crossed the threshold, a gust of cold wind blew past, and a mechanical sound suddenly exploded in my mind. Host class loss detected. System initializing. Unique hidden class activated. Congratulations to the host for awakening the only job in the heavens, Overlord Zerg. Hearing the message, I froze in my tracks. Immediately after, a blue panel appeared in front of my eyes, displaying my talents. Talent 1, Overlord Source. Automatically incubates 1 being per second. 0 consumption, no upper limit. Talent 2, Abyss Ladder. Consume a set number of servants to exchange for higher level units. Looking at these 2 lines, I realized the sheer scale of this power. I couldn't help but take a deep, shaky breath. My heart was pounding violently against my ribs. 86,400 seconds in a day means an army of 86,000 every single day. I stood there, thinking about the sheer scale of this power. I slowly extended my hand. With a single thought, I commanded, "Come out." A pitch-black soldier ant the size of a fist materialized instantly in my palm. I looked at its razor-sharp mandibles, capable of crushing steel, and smirked. Liang stole my Shadow King, but he unwittingly gave me a hive that can devour worlds. Just as the thought crossed my mind, the phone in my pocket vibrated. I checked the class group chat. Tomorrow is the Gaokao exam. My cousin, Li Fian, was scheduled to give a public demonstration at the training grounds. I stared at the message for a long moment. I tucked my phone away, a cold glint flashing in my eyes. Since the Li family wants to discard me like trash, they shouldn't blame me for flipping the table. The next morning, the moment I entered the school training grounds, the sound of voices hit me. The crowd's gossip reached my ears immediately. Isn't that Li Yao? The one the Li family threw out? He's a nobody now, yet he still has the nerve to show up. I walked through the crowd with a blank expression, heading for the stage. But before I could get there, a figure blocked my path. I looked at Janning Yu, who was standing there, arm in arm with my cousin, Li Fian. I stopped dead in my tracks the moment I saw them. Janning Yu let go of Li Fian's hand immediately. She took half a step back and spoke coldly. "Li Yao, let's end this. The current you is simply no longer on my level." I didn't say a word. I just stared at her in silence. Seeing my lack of reaction, Li Fian stepped up beside her. He pointed a finger at me and started barking insults. A loser should have the decency to act like one. Today, I'll teach you a lesson. Consider it a parting gift from the Li family. A surge of berserker rank aura exploded from his frame. He threw a punch straight at my face, the wind pressure condensing around his fist. Gasps of shock echoed through the crowd as they watched the strike. I stood perfectly still, not moving an inch. A single command flickered through my mind. As my thought reached the ground, the earth suddenly began to tremble. My shadow behind me started to boil and churn instantly. Thousands of ants surged out like a rising black tide. In a split second, the swarm completely engulfed Li Fian's ankles. "What is this? Get off me." Li Fian didn't even have time to react before the swarm dragged him to the ground. Hearing his screams, I realized this moment would be etched into my memory forever. Fian, the students who were mocking me just seconds ago, went dead silent. I watched Li Fian thrashing desperately on the floor by the entrance. In just a few seconds, his armor was gnawed into useless scraps of metal. Janning Yu collapsed to the ground in terror at the sight and let out a piercing scream. "Li Yao, stop. You're going to kill him." I turned my head slowly and locked eyes with her. "So, now you finally know what it feels like to be afraid." Without another word, I gave a casual wave of my hand. The swarm retreated into the shadows instantly, leaving Li Fian behind. He was covered in blood as I walked over and slapped him across the face. "Go back and tell the Li family that this is only the beginning." With that final warning, I walked straight out the door, knowing there was no reason to stay. My destination was the gloomy forest located just outside the city walls. At the dungeon entrance, the air was filled with the shouts of people looking for a party. As I walked toward the portal alone, the nearby adventurers shot me skeptical looks. Is this guy crazy? A rookie trying to solo a dungeon? I ignored their chatter. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. I stepped through the light curtain and immediately encountered level 5 demon wolves. They lunged at me with a single thought. I was their prey. I spent 50,000 foraging ants to summon a specialized unit. I traded them for rank 2 Ironjaw soldiers. As soon as the command left my lips, dozens of giant soldier ants appeared. They were the size of tanks and slammed heavily onto the forest floor. The demon wolves tucked their tails and tried to bolt in terror. I wasn't going to let them escape, so I pointed my hand toward the iron jaws. I gave the order to strike. Moving with the precision of a high-tech machine, they charged and closed the 100-meter gap in an instant. With a series of sickening crunches, the wolves were sliced apart. Level 5 demon wolves eliminated. Experience plus 50. Watching my experience bar fill up frantically, I pushed deeper into the woods. Within half an hour, the perimeter was cleared and I hit level 7. As I prepared to enter the central zone, shadows flickered in my perception range. I didn't need to turn around. I saw everything through the swarm's eyes. 5 assassins armed with daggers were closing in. They were creeping up behind me, but they were the ones walking into a death sentence. Young Amelie, one of them whispered, "There's $1 million bounty on your head." I felt the killing intent surging behind me and stopped in my tracks. Seeing me freeze, the lead assassin stepped out with a cruel smirk. "Kid, in your next life, try not to offend the Lee family." I stared at the dagger in his hand and smiled, thinking, "$1 million? I guess I'm worth a lot." "Too bad for you," I said coldly. "You don't stand a chance." The moment I finished speaking, the trap was sprung. Countless green afterimages blurred down from the treetops above. These were my high-agility units, the Abyss Mantises. Their blades were jagged and warped, designed for pure lethality. The assassins didn't even have time to scream. Thin red lines appeared across their throats as they fell. I stepped over the corpses and snatched the ID cards from their pockets. If the Lee family wants to keep sending me money, I'll gladly take it. After looting the bodies, I turned my gaze toward the dark heart of the forest. A level 10 boss was waiting for me in there. I marched forward, flanked by my swarming horde of servants. The moment I entered the central zone, a gust of foul, rotting wind hit me. The level 10 bloodthirsty wolf was different. A black aura leaked from its body, and its eyes were pure crimson. A system alert flashed. The boss has been corrupted and ascended to level 15. A system notification flashed, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I felt a surge of excitement. Corruption meant one thing, a much higher item drop rate. Hearing my approach, the corrupted wolf detached itself from the shadows. It roared and lunged at me like a blurred streak of fur and teeth. I didn't blink and shouted in a low voice, "Armored beetles, wall up." The ground shook instantly beneath my feet. My armored beetles swarmed together, forming a stone-hard wall with a heavy thud. The Wolf King slammed into the barrier, his momentum coming to a dead stop. Now was the time for an all-out assault while he was staggered. I focused on the Wolf King and swung my hand down hard. Tens of thousands of my insect army flooded over him like a rising tide. No matter how much the Wolf King struggled, his health bar plummeted. With one final, pitiful howl, the level 15 demonized Wolf King collapsed. I snatched the S-rank skill book, Leadership Stance, off the ground. Loud voices suddenly echoed from the entrance of the dungeon instance. Other guilds were arriving, so I quickly recalled my swarm and vanished into the trees. I needed a place better suited for leveling up, a place known as the Newbie's Grave. I stood at the entrance of the dungeon, staring at the gate that looked like a skeleton's maw. A cold chill hung in the air, making the nearby adventurers instinctively steer clear of me. "Did you hear? A 5-man team went in yesterday, and they still haven't come out. They're dead for sure. That place is crawling with undead immune to physical attacks." Ignoring the gossip, I walked toward the teleportation stone with a blank expression. I pressed my palm against the cold surface and waited for the prompt. The system interface flickered to life, displaying the standard difficulty options. Normal and hard modes were listed right there in front of me. I shook my head. If I wanted to level up fast, I needed the hidden option. I selected the difficulty that offered the highest experience yield, Nightmare. With a single thought, I confirmed my choice. The stone monument suddenly bled into a deep, crimson red. A warning flashed, Nightmare difficulty. Mortality rate, 99%. Confirm. I hit confirm and vanished in a flash of red light, leaving the crowd speechless. Holy crap, did someone just open the Nightmare gate? Who the hell is that desperate for a death wish? The moment I landed, a piercing chill seeped deep into my bones. I found myself surrounded by damp, weeping stone walls. Green wisps of ghost fire drifted through the stagnant air. A mournful, high-pitched wail echoed from the darkness ahead. Dozens of translucent white wraiths began floating down the corridor toward me. Howling specters, level 30 elite monsters. I watched them float through the stone columns toward me, my gaze remaining calm. The most annoying thing about these monsters is their 90% immunity to physical damage. But for a Zerg Lord, there are no weaknesses. If physical force fails, I just pivot. I raised my hand, ready to use my power to reshape the natural order. I moved to summon a third-order magical unit. The Searing Flame Moth. Hundreds of moths appeared, their wings burning with lethal intent. Those intense flames manifested out of thin air. They illuminated the dark prison as if it were broad daylight. At my command, a meteor shower of fireballs slammed into the specters. The arrogant ghosts shrieked in agony before vanishing into ash instantly. I kept moving, sweeping through the dungeon and crushing everything in my path. Zombies, skeletons, or ghosts. Nothing lasted more than 3 seconds against my Zerg C. Half an hour later, I reached the lowest level of the prison. I pushed open the final bronze door to reveal a massive hall of white bone. In the center sat a throne constructed from countless human skulls. A skeleton king sat upon it, his soul fire flickering violently as he rose. A system warning flashed. Nightmare boss encounter. The Pale Lord, level 35. Despite the terrifying pressure and the aura of despair, I didn't take a single step back. Instead, I just smirked and whispered, "Finally, I found you." The Pale Lord let out an ancient, bone-chilling roar. The rusted sword in his hand unleashed a gray wave of deathly silence. The ground was plowed open, leaving a deep, jagged furrow in the stone. Seeing the destruction, I decided against summoning a massive swarm. Against a powerful boss like this, numbers can actually become a hindrance. I needed to restrict his movements with cold, calculated force. I commanded my Zerg units to deploy and concentrate their fire. Dozens of soldier ants rushed forward, ignoring the threat of certain death. They lunged for his joints, sinking their mandibles into his leg bones. The Pale Lord crushed them a second later, but the damage was done. They had successfully slowed him down, creating the opening I needed. In that brief window of time, I had my units bombard his knees with fireballs. With a sharp, echoing crack, the Pale Lord dropped to one knee. I wasn't about to let him recover. It was time to end this. I signaled for a total discharge of my self-destructing beetles. Thousands of these plump, explosive insects swarmed the floor. They rolled like living grenades right to the Pale Lord's feet. A violent explosion rocked the hall, making the entire dungeon tremble. As the smoke and dust cleared, the massive skeleton of the Lord lay shattered. His bones were scattered across the floor, his soul fire finally extinguished. It was impossible for him to resist as he let out one last roar of resentment. I walked over to the remains and prepared to finish it. I crushed his skull under my boot, officially slaying the Pale Lord. I obtained the unique item, Crown of the King of the Dead, and a biological core was detected. My high-level tech system requested to incubate the core to create a new security unit. Hearing the system message, my eyes burned with fervor. This was exactly why I came here. I gave the order, and the incubation process began immediately. Countless worker bees swarmed the Pale Lord's remains to begin the genetic recombination. 10 minutes later, a completely new figure stood before me. He was no longer a loose pile of bones, but a humanoid warrior encased in white armor. The armor was crafted from pale, polished bone, housing a lethal humanoid spirit within. The blade in his hand was forged from a spinal column, radiating a bone-chilling frost. He dropped to one knee and spoke with a raspy, loyal voice. "Greetings, Master." I looked at this new killing machine and decided on a name for him. From now on, I told him, "You shall be known as the Pale Sun." The moment I stored the Pale Sun away, a golden announcement echoed through the city. Congratulations to Li Jiao and his party for the first clear of the Howling Prison on Nightmare level. The announcement declared they had broken the all-time record, repeating 3 times for all to hear. Outside the dungeon, the crowd was already descending into absolute chaos. Everyone knew Li Yao was just the useless failure the Li family had thrown away. It felt like a sick joke. Not even the top-tier guilds dared to touch Nightmare difficulty. Yet I had cleared it alone, and as I stepped through the portal, I saw the entrance was mobbed. I was completely surrounded. Countless eyes locked onto me instantly. I saw shock, I saw doubt, and I saw pure greed. "Little brother, you're quite impressive," a voice called out. The crowd parted as a woman with a striking figure stepped forward. She was dressed in flowing, seductive red robes. As she approached, the people around us held their breath when they saw the badge on her chest. It was Lin Jin, the president of the Silver Moon Guild. Lin Jin walked right up to me and gave me a playful wink. "Interested in joining your big sister's guild? 10 million a year, and any gear you want." Hearing that offer, the bystanders looked like their eyes were burning with jealousy. I gave her a quick, cold glance and simply said, "I'm not interested." Without another word, I moved to walk right past her. Seeing me show her such total disrespect, a massive bodyguard behind her lost his temper. "Kid, don't you dare act so smug," he growled. "It's an honor to be personally invited by our president." He reached out a hand to grab my shoulder and barked, "Stay put." The moment his hand was about to touch me, a white blur flashed and the sound of snapping bones echoed. The massive bodyguard screamed in agony as he was sent flying through the air. He hit the ground hard, clutching his shattered wrist and rolling in the dirt. Everyone stared in stunned silence as a figure materialized behind me. A warrior clad in pale bone armor had appeared out of thin air. The ancient blade in its hand dripped with fresh blood as I looked coldly at the fallen guard. Watching this scene unfold, Lin Jin's playful expression vanished instantly. I could see her mind racing, a summon with this much intelligence and speed. She was an expert who knew exactly what she was looking at. She recognized the terrifying uniqueness of the Pale Sun immediately. I reached out and gave the Pale Sun a light pat on the shoulder. I signaled for him to pull back his murderous aura, then I turned back to Lin Jin. I asked her flatly, "Do you still have something to say?" She took a deep breath, the shock in her eyes replaced by a heavy solemnity. She stepped aside, clearing the path for me, and said, "Nothing else. I hope we can collaborate in the future." I didn't stop to chat. I simply walked away with the Pale Sun following close behind. Back at my rented apartment, I turned on my phone and saw the headlines. The news that Li Yao was the first to clear a nightmare dungeon was already trending everywhere. But for me, this was just the warm-up before the real show. The National Marshal exam was only 3 days away, and then a new notification popped up. The young master of the Li family had finally made his move. Li Si had successfully awakened as a second-stage Shadow King, vowing to dominate the national exam. I stared at his smug face on the screen and let out a cold chuckle. Second stage? We'll see about that. I opened my attribute panel. After clearing that nightmare dungeon, my level had already skyrocketed to 20. With the pale sun as my lethal weapon, I just hoped Li Si could last more than a few seconds against me. 3 days flew by in the blink of an eye. On the day of the national exam, the entire city was buzzing with electric energy. Tens of thousands of candidates gathered in the central plaza, creating a massive, suffocating crowd. As soon as I arrived, I felt a sharp gaze filled with pure killing intent. I turned my head and saw him, Li Si. He was surrounded by followers like a star in the night sky, decked out in full S-class gear. He looked like a god descending to earth, basking in the attention. When he saw me looking, he slowly raised his thumb. He dragged it across his throat in a clear, silent threat. I didn't blink. I just looked him in the eye and flipped him the middle finger. Right then, a loud announcement boomed across the plaza. The national exam officially begins. First round, survival battle on a deserted island. A massive pillar of light descended, and tens of thousands of students vanished instantly. After a wave of dizziness, I landed in the middle of a dense, virgin jungle. 3 examinees suddenly jumped out. They emerged from the bushes. Hey brother, hand over your point card if you don't want a beating. I looked at these 3 guys. They were closing in with weapons. I just sighed. Why are people always in such a hurry to die? Hearing my words, the 3 of them froze in shock. A second later, they exploded in rage. Die, kill him, just as they lunged forward, I snapped my fingers. Pale suns, clear the area. A blinding white light flashed. The weapons in their hands shattered all at once. Before they could react, they were sent flying 30 feet by a massive force, slamming into the trees. What kind of monster is this? They stared at the figure, standing right in front of me. That warrior in bone armor. It radiated a terrifying aura. The 3 of them turned pale with pure terror. They quickly crushed their teleportation talismans to forfeit. I picked up the point cards they left behind. First batch of points secured. I looked toward the darkest depths of the jungle. That's where the Real elites gather. Time to hunt those so-called geniuses. Saying goodbye to the small fry on the outskirts, I sprinted toward the center of the island. The wild monsters I encountered didn't even require my help. Nothing could slow me down. My pale suns cleared everything in my path. Beside me, they simply swung their bodies and weapons. With every flash of their blades, they cleared a path through the brush. System alert. You have killed a level 15 Ironhide Rhino. Points plus 10. System alert. You have killed a level 18 Wind Beast. Points plus 20. I checked the leaderboard and saw my name skyrocketing like a rocket. Half an hour later, I reached the core of the deserted island. This was where the top candidates of the martial exam gathered. The moment I appeared, dozens of powerful auras locked onto me. One gaze in particular was piercingly sharp. A young man with a shaved head and a giant sword stared me down. Lu Xingwen, the top genius of Linen City and a sword saint by profession. He unsheathed his massive blade and asked, "Are you the Li Yang who soloed the Nightmare Dungeon?" The crowd went dead silent the moment they heard my name. Lu Xingwen pointed the tip of his sword directly at the space between my eyes. "I heard you're strong," he said, "but I am stronger." He transformed into a blur of steel and lunged at me with a blade storm. I watched the sky fill with lethal shadows and didn't move an inch. A pale sun stepped forward and blocked the strike with a crisp metallic ring. My summon caught his ultimate attack with a single hand. Lu Xingwen's pupils shrunk in horror as I whispered, "Too slow." As the words left my lips, the pale sun threw a heavy punch. It was a backhand strike, fast and effortless. Lu Xingwen was sent flying, man and sword together. He only stopped after smashing through 3 massive trees. The top genius lay on the ground vomiting blood, and the scene fell into a deathly silence. I didn't bother chasing him down. Instead, I looked at the leaderboard. First place, Li Su, 5,000 points. Suddenly, the sky turned a deep, bloody red. The system broadcast echoed across the island once again. Warning, the ultimate beast tide arrives in 10 minutes. Only the survivors advance. The moment they heard the words, beast tide, every candidate's face went pale. Their expressions shifted from shock to pure terror. The ground began to tremble as the roar of thousands of beasts rose from the jungle. The candidates panicked, screaming for everyone to run for their lives. "Find cover, form teams, hurry, group up," they yelled in total chaos. I ignored the madness, found a clean, large rock, and sat down. A candidate running past me saw that I wasn't moving. He kindly shouted, "What are you doing? Do you have a death wish?" Hearing that, I simply gave him a dismissive wave of my hand. "Just keep running," I muttered. To me, those aren't monsters, they're points. They're experience points, and looking at the dark swarm in the distance, they're my food. A cold smile spread across my face. Perfect timing, my insects are starving. The beast tide hit the defense line like a crushing tsunami. In a single shockwave, dozens of candidates were instantly teleported out by the white light. Hearing the screams of misery all around me, I stood up and faced the darkness. The survivors behind me froze in shock, wondering what I was trying to do. They probably thought I was looking for a quick way to die. Just as the first level 20 armored tyrannosaur lunged at me, I snapped my fingers. "Come out," I whispered. "Let the feast begin." The ground collapsed instantly as an army of hundreds of thousands emerged. They rose from the earth, surrounding the once ferocious pack of beasts. Seeing these grotesque insects, even the monsters let out whimpers of pure terror. With one command, my black tide of insects instantly flooded the pack. The skin-crawling sound of gnawing echoed through the sky. The beasts that drove the candidates to despair were like paper against my horde. The INM focused on shattering their defenses with brutal efficiency. My elite units followed behind, harvesting heads by the second. In less than 10 minutes, the massive beast tide vanished, leaving only white bones and piles of point badges. I looked at the leaderboard and watched my scores skyrocket into the clouds. The candidates behind me stood frozen with their mouths wide open, unable to speak. This wasn't a trial zone anymore. It was my personal slaughterhouse. Suddenly, the speakers blared, and I was teleported back to the real-world plaza. 1,000 shocked stares landed on me the moment my feet hit the ground. But among the all, I felt one gaze dripping with pure, concentrated malice. My father's face was so dark it looked like a storm cloud about to burst. Beside him, Lise was trembling, his fists clenched so hard his nails dug into his palms. I ignored them and walked over to the designated resting area. I had barely taken a seat when a middle-aged examiner in a crisp uniform approached me. Liang, right? The head of the Li family asked me to deliver a message. I looked up at him coldly, waiting for the nonsense to begin. The examiner leaned in and lowered his voice. The next round is one-on-one combat. If you're smart, you'll forfeit if you face young Master Lise. Your father says if you surrender, your past crimes are forgiven, and he'll give you 5 million. I let out a sharp, mocking laugh. 5 million. Is Lise's life really worth that little? I asked, watching the examiner's face turn pale. Don't be arrogant, kid, he hissed. Lise has already awakened the second form of the S-rank Dark King. I didn't bother responding to his threat. I simply closed my eyes and told him to get lost. Half an hour later, the speakers announced, first match, Liang versus Wang Dali. He was a massive man, 2 meters tall, Wang Dali, the rock guardian of Rai. He looked at me and flashed a bloodthirsty grin. Little brat, it's your bad luck that you ran into me today. My defense is invincible among my peers. Before he could finish, I flicked my wrist. The pale sun appeared instantly behind him and delivered a side strike. He slammed into him with the hilt of the sword. One hit. That was all it took. He ended up embedded in the wall of the stands, and the entire stadium went dead silent. Total silence. The matches that followed were all carbon copies of the first. No matter who the opponent was or what class they held, no one could last a single second. Not against the pale sun. Finally, the names on the giant screen stopped spinning for the semifinals. Liang versus Lu Xingwen. Lu Xingwen stepped onto the ring clutching his sword, looking like a completely different person. His aura was sharper, showing signs that he was about to break past level 20. Liang, I was careless back on that deserted island, he said coldly. He drew his blade, the steel humming with energy. This time, I'll show you the true power of a sword saint. Ultimate skill, Red Lotus Sword Dance. As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed. He turned into a literal whirlwind of flames. The audience erupted in cheers at the sight of such overwhelming power. I just shook my head at the noise. It was all for show. As the firestorm closed in, I extended my right hand. Heavenly Ladder Summon, Level 3 Unit. Rock-Armored Worm King. A giant beetle the size of a small mountain appeared out of thin air. It stood right in front of me, blocking his path. His sword strikes slammed into the creature's shell. But the rock-armored Worm King didn't even flinch, only sparks flew. Lu Xingwen's eyes nearly popped out of his head when he saw the beetle was unharmed. I can't break his defense. How is this possible? He gasped. Seeing that he was completely exhausted, I snapped my fingers. The Worm King slammed its massive body against the ground. A terrifying shockwave ripped through the arena. Lu Xingwen coughed up a massive spray of blood. He was sent flying clean out of the ring. Liang wins and advances to the finals. The referee was so stunned it took him 3 seconds to even react. My opponent's hand trembled as he tried to steady himself. The finals were finally here, and there was no more room for suspense. Lisu stood on the other side of the ring, staring me down with cold eyes. He stepped into the arena as dark, gloomy energy surged from his body. Liang, those skeletons and beetles must be your trump cards, right? Too bad that against me, the child of shadows, your summons are nothing. They're just piles of scrap metal. He slammed both hands onto the ground, and his domain began to unfurl. An eternal night descended, covering the entire arena in pitch-black shadows. The crowd erupted as visibility dropped to 0. Lisu had mastered a domain at level 20. Standing in the darkness, I felt a powerful force pressing down on me. It was a total suppression, and Lisu's voice echoed from every direction. Do you feel it? This is the power of an S-rank class. This is the power our father stole from you to give to me. In this place, I am God. I let out a dry laugh at his arrogance. God, don't make me laugh. Say goodbye to your little fantasy. Since he claimed to be the Lord of Shadows, I decided to show him the truth. I was going to show him what real darkness looked like. Come forth, Shadow Stalkers. As my words fell into the shadow domain that originally belonged to me, countless purple eyes suddenly snapped open in the dark. These were my new specialized units. What is happening? My energy, it's draining away. Li Su's panicked voice echoed through the darkness as I gave the order. Eat it all. The sound of countless tiny jaws chewing filled the air. The eternal night domain he was so proud of was being devoured like a cracker, bite by bite. In just a few seconds, sunlight broke through and hit the arena again. The darkness was gone. Li Su stood there alone, his face pale as a ghost. His entire body was trembling uncontrollably, and all around him, packed in dense, suffocating clusters, were my purple beetles, covering every inch of the ground. What kind of monsters are these? Li Su backed away in terror before collapsing hard onto the floor. Watching him crawl, I began walking toward my father. Step by step, I approached him and asked, "Is this your S-rank power?" It's pathetic. I stopped in my tracks when I heard Li Yang's furious roar. I didn't even look back at him. I pointed at Li Su on the ground, my voice echoing through the entire arena. "When you stripped me of my class, did you ever think I might want to give up too? When you threw me out like trash, did you ever imagine this day would come?" I ignored the crowd's gasps and Li Yang's useless shouting. I raised my boot and slammed it down onto Li Su's chest. "This stomp is for the Li Yao you all murdered," I muttered. The sickening crunch of breaking bones echoed through the silence. Li Su let out a pig-like squeal before passing out from the pain. I pulled my foot back and scanned the crowd. No one dared to speak. The referee's voice trembled as he made the final announcement. "The champion of this year's martial exam is Li Yao. I received my rewards, the Divine Level Skill Book, Advent of the Zerg Emperor, and the entry token for the secret realm of the Dragon Race." Li Su was finished, and the Li family's reputation was dragged through the mud. But this wasn't enough. I wanted to stand at the very peak of this world. Just then, an old man dressed in a sharp military uniform stepped onto the stage. "Li Yao, I am General Wang from the military department," he said. "Are you interested in heading to the front lines? That is where you belong." The real hell. When I heard that word, I just smiled. For the swarm, hell is the best buffet there is. "I'm in," I said, keeping it short. General Wang from the military department let a satisfied grin spread across his face. "Good lad," he muttered, not even giving me time to say goodbye. A military helicopter descended from the sky. It landed right in the center of the stage, and I climbed aboard under everyone's envious gaze. Inside the cabin, I sat across from the high-ranking officer. General Wang pointed toward the clouds outside the window. "The entrance to the Dragon Race's secret realm is right behind the Beijing defense line. That's the place," he continued. "The front line of the war between humans and monsters." I listened in silence. I looked at the golden token in my hand and realized this was my ticket to the front. This wasn't just a reward, it was a test. Only by surviving the Dragon Realm would I earn the right to enter the true battlefield. 3 hours later, the helicopter touched down at a base that looked like a steel fortress. A thick, murderous aura slammed into me the moment the doors opened. I followed General Wang's lead through the base. We passed through layer after layer of checkpoints until we reached a massive, imposing gate. This military zone is locked down by guards armed to the teeth. Once I enter, my life is my own responsibility. Life or death. The heavy scent of mortality is the only thing I can feel here. General Wang patted my shoulder and warned me that once I'm inside, I'm on my own. He told me about dragon lions and monsters mutated by dragon blood. He even mentioned rats, which made me smirk. This trip won't be lonely after all. I pressed the token against the bronze gate, and it groaned open as a wild aura surged out. I took a single step forward, felt a wave of dizziness, and finally landed. I found myself in a scarlet wasteland, but the moment I touched down, the system in my mind began to vibrate violently with a loud warning. "High-rank dragon gene detected." The alert echoed repeatedly in my head. I just smiled. This place is an absolute paradise for my evolution. But before I could even take a moment to breathe or steady my stance, the ground beneath my feet exploded as a monster lunged out. It was covered in coarse red fur with the body of a giant crocodile. It unhinged its bloody jaws, snapping hungrily at my thigh. A dragon blood lizard, just a common, low-level pest. I didn't even bother to move, not even a single finger. Then, a white blur flashed across my vision. A pale figure flashed through the air, moving with blinding speed. Clad in bone armor, he appeared instantly atop the lizard's head and drove a bone blade through its skull like tofu. The lizard convulsed a few times and then went limp. A notification popped up. "You have killed a level 25 dragon blood lizard. You have obtained 1 dragon blood essence." I walked over and looked down. I watched the faint glow of energy emanating from the corpse. I gave the command to my system to begin the harvest. Following my orders, several scavenger ants crawled onto the carcass. They began to tear into the flesh and consume it greedily. "Successfully extracted a trace of the dragon gene," the system chimed. I watched the progress bar for my swarm units steadily climb. My eyes burned with fervor. If I could find a real dragon, what would my swarm become? With that expectation, I began to push deeper into the dragon's territory. I encountered more creatures, hydras, dragon beasts, and even dragon blood mages. These powerful monsters, rare in the outside world, were now nothing but food for my swarm. As they fed, my insects began to change. The black shells of my ants now bore dark red veins. Their bite force doubled, their bodies grew leaner, and a draconic aura seeped from their teeth. Even my pale sun's bone structure began to emit a faint, golden luster. I was in the middle of this slaughtering spree when I heard it. The intense sound of a violent battle echoed from just up ahead. I heard phrases mixed in from an incomprehensible language, Japanese. I stopped in my tracks as a cold flash flickered in my eyes. This is Dragon Nation territory, so why are there foreigners hiding behind that massive dragon bone? I poked my head out to look and saw two groups facing off in the valley below. One side consisted of Dragon Nation professionals in military uniforms, standing back to back. They were bloodied and battered, desperately defending the entrance to a cave. The other side was a group of 7 or 8 masked men in black, wielding katanas. Their leader spoke in forced, broken Dragon Nation dialect. Hand over the dragon crystals. Do it, and we might leave your corpses in one piece. A Dragon Nation captain with a broken arm spat out a mouthful of blood. Keep dreaming, he growled. This belongs to the Dragon Nation, you thieving bastards. The leader in black let out a cold, sharp laugh. No more talking then. Kill them all. Just as the Dragon Nation warriors were about to be cut to pieces, I stepped out. Looks lively here, I said. Mind if I join in? The sudden voice left both sides stunned as the leader in black turned his head. Seeing I was alone, a trace of contempt flashed in his eyes. Ignorant Chinese brat, seeking death. The moment I heard that slur, the smile vanished from my face. I was going to leave your bodies intact, I whispered. Now, I don't think I'll bother. The leader roared in fury as 3 ninjas vanished instantly, but to my swarm, their heartbeats sounded like thunder. I snapped my fingers, and the executioner mantises struck with blinding speed. Swoosh, swoosh. Jets of blood suddenly sprayed into the empty air. The 3 invisible ninjas hadn't even touched me before my mutated mantises pierced their hearts. Nanny? The leader gasped, staring at the green monsters that appeared out of nowhere. He watched in horror as his comrades' corpses were dragged away and devoured by ants in an instant. The remaining men in black finally felt a surge of pure terror. Your turn, I said, giving them no time to process the scene. I gave the order, attack. The ground split open as thousands of soldiers, strengthened by dragon blood, swarmed out. In that moment, the valley transformed into a living hell. The ninjutsu and katanas of the men in black were useless. They couldn't break the shells of my mutated swarm, leaving only faint white marks. But every single strike from my insects was a death sentence. Each bite tore away massive chunks of flesh. The leader saw the situation was turning desperate. He slammed a smoke bomb into the ground, desperate to escape. He turned tail and tried to run, thinking he could actually leave. I snorted coldly as the pale sun instantly transformed into a streak of white light. It hunted him down and snapped both of his legs like twigs. The Sankusi leader's legs were sliced clean off. I walked over to him as he crawled through the dirt and ground my boot into his hand. I looked down and asked, "How did you get in here?" The leader was drenched in cold sweat from the pain, but he still managed to grit his teeth. Go to hell, he spat. He tried to bite his own tongue to commit suicide, but I just smirked. I waved my hand, and a tiny parasite worm dropped onto his face. It crawled directly up his nostril. He let out a blood-curdling scream as his eyes rolled back into his head. His body went limp for a few seconds. Then, he stopped struggling entirely. He sat up like a hollow puppet and stared at me with lifeless eyes. We infiltrated through a space crack to steal the Emperor Dragon's egg, he droned. My pupils contracted sharply at the mention of an Emperor Dragon egg. In a place full of dragon corpses, there was actually a living egg. I finished off the leader and left the Dragon Kingdom warriors behind. I sprinted toward the central zone, following the intel I'd just extracted. If there's an Emperor Dragon egg out there, I'm not letting anyone else touch it. The closer I got to the center, the more the temperature skyrocketed. The ground turned into flowing magma, and my low-level insects began losing health. The system notifications were flashing nonstop. I frowned at the warnings. Suddenly, the lake of lava in front of me began to boil violently. A massive figure 10 meters tall rose slowly from the depths. It was a level 30 elite monster, the lava golem. I stared at the creature, its entire body coated in dripping magma. I didn't panic. I just smirked and thought, if it likes fire, let's give it a real burn. I waved my hand with a sharp snap. I spent thousands of crystals to summon my Tier 4 units, the explosive fire dragonflies. They swarmed the sky, glowing crimson and completely immune to the heat. I pointed forward and commanded, go, give him a bath. The dragonflies dove down like a fleet of kamikaze bombers. The golem swung its massive fists, but it couldn't touch the agile insects. The first dragonfly slammed directly into the golem's chest. A violent explosion rocked the entire cavern. The deafening chain reaction sent 100-meter waves of lava crashing outward. The golem's thick rock armor began to shatter and peel away. Its glowing inner core was finally exposed. The pale sun stood no chance, and the final blow is already waiting on the website. The pale sun was ready, leaping into the air by stepping off the jagged rocks. The bone blade in his hand swelled until it reached 3 meters long. It transformed into a massive biological greatsword, slicing through the spray of lava. He aimed directly for the core, the very heart of the beast's power. The golem's core shattered instantly, and with the guardian dead, I finally saw it. There, in the center of the lake, stood a solitary structure. An ancient altar carved entirely from crimson crystal. Floating at its center was a giant golden egg, nearly a meter tall. Ancient dragon patterns covered the shell, pulsing with light as if it were breathing. This was it, the Dragon King's egg. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. If I could just claim this, I could finally hatch a true Zerg dragon swarm. A force that would be truly unstoppable. But just as I moved toward my prize, a sudden chill stopped me cold. A mocking voice drifted down toward me from the shadows. It came from high above the altar. My, what a marvelous performance. I snapped my head up, searching the darkness. Standing at the top of the altar was a man in a pristine white suit. He wore gold-rimmed glasses and swirled a glass of red wine, looking down at me. "I didn't expect a Zerg master like you here," he said, "but unfortunately, this egg is mine." He appeared out of nowhere, and my entire body tensed up. I couldn't understand how he had bypassed my swarm's vision. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice cold as ice. The man gave a faint smile and pushed up his glasses. "I am Chris, the 8th Bishop of the Holy See." My pupils contracted the moment I heard that name. The Holy See was one of the most powerful forces in the West. To be a bishop, you had to be at least a level 40 second-class expert. "Since you helped me clear the Guardian, I'll give you a chance," he said. "Become my dog, and I might reward you with a single drop of this dragon's blood." I heard his offer and let out a sharp, dry laugh. "A dog? My swarm actually is missing a dog right now. I think you'd be a perfect fit," I replied, watching his reaction. The arrogant smile on Chris's face vanished instantly. "So, you've chosen death," he hissed. He raised a single finger toward me, summoning a pillar of holy light. A beam of white energy as thick as a bucket descended from the sky. It was moving too fast to dodge, so I gave the command, "Armored Kings, overlap." Dozens of armored Zerg Kings stacked themselves on top of me instantly. They formed a black pyramid to meet the crushing pillar of light. The impact was deafening as the light slammed into my shields. It tore through a dozen layers of armor instantly, but it finally stopped. I had successfully blocked his opening move. "You actually blocked my strike? Let's see how many more you can handle." He sneered and extended both of his hands toward the sky. Dozens of identical pillars of light began to condense above us. The air hummed with enough energy to turn the entire area to ash. I looked up at the devastating formation hovering over my head. Conventional methods weren't going to win this fight. The level gap was too wide for me to just sit back and defend. So, I decided I wouldn't defend at all. Self-destruction charge. I issued the most insane command possible to my swarm. Every single insect abandoned their defense and sprinted toward Chris. Chris's expression shifted as the tide of monsters swarmed the altar. He was forced to pull back his attack to protect himself. My Zerg exploded against his holy shields like a storm of gore. But that chaos was exactly the opening I needed. "Pale Sun, fusion!" I roared at the top of my lungs. The pale sun beside me turned its head, and the process began. He transformed into a beam of white light and surged into my body. I activated my unique ability. Monarch, the biological bone battle armor. A pale, bone-white plating instantly encased my entire frame. In my hand, a weapon began to manifest. I drew a bone sword radiating the cold energy of death. Feeling my power multiply tenfold, I slammed my foot against the ground. The stone floor beneath me shattered instantly. I launched myself forward like a white missile. I appeared in front of Chris in the blink of an eye. I unleashed the Dragon Slayer strike, channeling all of my power and the pale sun's energy. The heavy blow smashed into his holy shield, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. Before Chris could even react, my bone sword was already coming down. His head rolled across the floor. Pure terror was still frozen in Chris's wide, lifeless eyes. I killed a level 45 Cardinal, maxing out my experience and reaching level 25. I deactivated the fusion state and looked down at his headless corpse. I didn't have time to check the loot in detail yet. My gaze was already fixed on the center of the altar. The golden Emperor Dragon Egg was glowing with a tempting light. I reached out and pressed my hand against the burning shell. The system notification flashed before my eyes immediately. Detected, Fire Emperor Dragon Egg, Mythic level creature. Option 1, hatch directly to obtain a divine beast pet. Option 2, decompose the gene to integrate it into the hive and unlock a new Zerg evolution path. I looked at the two choices and didn't hesitate for a single second. I chose option 2, evolution for my entire race. The shell of the dragon egg shattered instantly. The golden tissue inside began to glow with a deep blue light. The essence was continuously transported into my system space. Congratulations to the host for a successful fusion. New unit unlocked. Infernal Dragon Zerg. New skill unlocked. All Dragon Zerg stats increased by 30%. Following the system notification, a new Zerg creature manifested. It stood before me with a slender, lethal frame covered in crimson dragon scales. A pair of fleshy wings grew from its armored back. Thick, burning saliva dripped from its maw. It looked like pure magma, a perfect killing machine. It was the ultimate fusion of dragon and Zerg genes, capable of flight and magma-based attacks. I stared at the impressive attribute panel of my new soldier. I nodded with cold satisfaction. With this, my power was absolute. I felt a surge of confidence for the upcoming war, and with a wide sweep of my hand, I stored all my Zerg back into the space. I pulled out a city return scroll and tore it open, letting the white light envelop me. I vanished from the dragon race sub-realm just as it began to collapse into the front lines of the abyss. 2 days later, inside the teleportation hall of the Beijing base, General Wang was pacing back and forth, his face etched with anxiety. He couldn't stop moving, his nerves clearly frayed. "It's been 2 days already," he muttered. "Why is there still no news?" Right then, the teleportation circle flared to life, and I stepped out, drenched in a bloody aura. General Wang's eyes lit up as he rushed over, asking, "How did it go? Did you get the dragon crystal?" I shook my head, and I watched his expression darken instantly. "It doesn't matter if you failed," he sighed. "It's just good to have you back alive." I cut him off with a faint, cold smile playing on my lips. "I didn't get the dragon crystal," I said calmly, "but I did consume the Fire Emperor dragon egg." General Wang stumbled back, nearly losing his footing in pure shock. "What did you say?" "The legendary Emperor dragon egg." I simply nodded at the old general's stunned face and added one more thing. "Also, I killed a red cardinal named Cress while I was at it." Before he could even process that news, a piercing alarm siren shrieked through the entire base. The ancient clan's vanguard had just breached the first line of defense. They were supposed to be invincible within their own realm. I stared at the blood-red zone on the screen, my fighting spirit flaring. "I'll go meet them myself," I said, boarding a transport plane for the front. The moment I stepped off the plane and entered the city, the stench of blood and gunpowder filled my lungs under a dark, ashen sky. Massive explosions and monster roars echoed as the wounded were carried from the walls. The monsters had launched another assault, leaving the defenses in tatters. Their roars were so loud they felt like they were vibrating inside my skull. I hurried to the top of the wall and looked out over the horizon. An army of black ghouls stretched out below like a vast, dark ocean. Dozens of massive siege beasts were lumbering through the monstrous crowd. They slammed into the gates, making the entire wall shudder with every impact. A soldier drenched in blood ran toward the commander, screaming in desperation. "Commander, we can't hold them. The wall has been breached." "Then pray to your gods, but you will not fall back," the commander roared. "Thousands of homes are behind us. I'll die on this wall before I run." Right then, a siege beast smashed a gaping hole straight through the fortifications. A tide of ghouls came pouring through the gap like a flood. They tore into everything in their path as the defense line finally collapsed. The commander drew his blade, ready to go down in one last stand. He looked like he wanted to run, but a calm voice suddenly rang in his ear. "Step aside," I commanded, making the commander spin around in shock. He saw a young man in a black trench coat standing right in the breach. "Who are you? Get back. It's too dangerous there," he yelled. I ignored his shouting and just stared at the ghouls pouring in. Trash like this doesn't deserve to stand on this ground. I raised my hand and whispered, "Come forth, let's teach them a lesson." The air trembled as hundreds of twisted infernal dragon worms appeared from nothing. They unfurled massive, fleshy wings and hovered in the air. The commander stood frozen, staring at the dragons above him. The next second, I waved my hand, and hundreds of torrents of dragon fire poured down. The flames covered everything instantly. The fierce ghouls in the breach were vaporized without a second thought. Just like that, gone. The soldiers around me couldn't even process what kind of power this was. They forgot to fire their weapons, staring blankly at the sea of fire. But I wasn't finished yet. I opened the abyss gate and placed both hands on the wall. Infinite swarms of insects crawled down the fortifications like a black waterfall. They surged into the monster crowd like a living tide. The feast began as they started tearing the monsters apart. The numerical advantage the monsters once held vanished in an instant. I looked down at the chaotic mess of the monster army and turned to the commander. He was still dazed, so I snapped, "What are you waiting for?" The commander woke up as if from a dream, a wild light of joy exploding in his eyes. "Counterattack! Everyone, listen up," he roared. "Support the Lord. Coordinate your fire." The soldiers finally snapped out of it and launched their assault. They moved in perfect sync with my swarm. Right in the center of the battlefield, I sat calmly on the back of a massive jumping ripper. I watched the carnage like a king inspecting his territory. Whenever a high-level monster appeared, a flash of white light decapitated it instantly. The slaughter continued from day until night. Finally, the last ghoul was burned to ash by an infernal dragon worm. But just as the soldiers began to celebrate our victory, the ground groaned. A sudden, violent tremor shook the earth. A strange energy surged from the distant abyss crack, swirling into a massive portal of bone. "What is that thing?" the commander screamed in pure terror. 5 figures slowly stepped out of the pale white gate. Their aura was so cold it felt like the entire battlefield had frozen solid. "Warning, spatial displacement detected. Ancient Abyss Royalty Elites. Average level, 50. I stared down these 5 monsters. My gaze hardened as I recognized them, the Ancient Abyss Royalty. The leader of the Ancients let out a dry, raspy laugh. A high-pitched screech followed, as if he were mocking me. "Human, your insects are interesting, but they are nothing to us. Against our absolute bone armor, your bugs can't even scratch their teeth." So much trash talk. Did they really think that was my full strength? I opened my arms wide, embracing the entire battlefield. "I'll show you the true meaning of the swarm. System, initiate displacement. Natural evolution. Incubate all resources. Objective, self-destruction." The silver-tinted earth beneath the insects began to shudder. It felt like a magnitude 10 earthquake was ripping through the world. Then, a sight emerged that made everyone's skin crawl as the ground exploded for miles. Countless silver beetles erupted from the soil like geysers. They had no sharp claws or fangs, but their bodies glowed with unstable energy. And there were billions of them. "What are these things?" the leader stammered. The soul fire in the ancient leader's eyes flickered violently with the first hint of fear. "Kill," I commanded softly. Order received. Millions of silver insects lunged at the 5 ancients like madmen. "Get back, you filth!" the ancients screamed, frantically swinging their bone swords. Every strike slaughtered hundreds, even thousands of my silver beetles. But it was useless. 1,000 died, and 10,000 more surged to take their place. This wasn't just a fight. It was total annihilation, a complete devouring. A single silver insect crawled onto the leader's leg and detonated. The blast cracked his bone armor, followed immediately by a second explosion. Then a third. "This is impossible," the clan leader shrieked in terror. He tried to flee, desperate to take flight and reach the safety of the clouds. But my purgatory dragon worms had already locked down the airspace. Innumerable blasts of dragon rock forced him back down to the blood-soaked earth. Agonizing screams echoed across the entire battlefield. I watched with cold indifference. "Thank you for the meal," I thought. This wasn't a battle. It was a slaughterhouse. A one-sided massacre led by a single, unwavering will. A public execution staged specifically for the experts of the abyss. The skin-crawling sound of constant explosions finally began to fade. The smoke dissipated slowly, revealing 5 massive craters in the plain. The ground was eroding rapidly. Not even ashes remained of my enemies. Those 5 elites, feared by the entire military, were gone. The silence was deafening. The soldiers stood frozen, forgetting to even breathe as I climbed the mountain of insect corpses. I stared at the distant abyss crack, knowing my name was now a nightmare for their kind. The system began calculating the battle results, tallying the fallen soldiers and the ancient elites. With 5 elites slain, the boy I once was had finally become a man. My level hit 30, and my swarm reached 10 million as I turned my back on the abyss, coat fluttering. I told the military the first line of defense was secure, then vanished into the smoke with my dragons. Behind me, countless soldiers raised their weapons and let out an earth-shattering roar. "Long live the Zerg Lord," they screamed. "Long live the king. From this day forward, I will be the one who dominates this world." And I was just getting started.